Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to crack open America's oldest cold case. For over 400 years, the question of why the Roanoke colonists vanished back in 1587 has reigned as our most chilling unsolved mystery. But, well, what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if it's a story not of ghosts, but of desperate, incredible human survival? Let's dive right into this. Today, we're challenging that massive 400-year-old myth that these people just vanished into thin air. We are completely throwing out the folklore and the ghost stories. Instead, we're going to look at what the hard science, modern archaeology, and forgotten historical records actually tell us about the real fate of this expedition. Chapter 1. The Scene of the Crime. Okay, so our investigation really begins on August 18, 1590. Picture this. Governor John White steps foot back onto Roanoke Island after a treacherous journey, only to find an utterly silent, completely abandoned settlement. To really get why he was so shocked, we have to look at the timeline. Back in 1587, 115 English men, women, and children arrived at Roanoke to build a permanent colony. But almost immediately, they ran low on supplies. Governor White was forced to sail back to England for help that very same year. But then, the Anglo-Spanish War broke out. The looming threat of the Spanish Armada meant Queen Elizabeth literally grounded all English ships. White was forbidden to leave. By the time he finally made it back in 1590, the ticking clock had totally run out. 3 whole years had passed, and his people, including his own daughter and his infant granddaughter Virginia Dare, were just gone.
Now, White found the settlement's houses carefully dismantled. There was absolutely no sign of a struggle, no bodies, and no graves. What he did find was a single cryptic word carved into a prominent palisade post at the entrance of the fort: CROATOAN. Now, CROATOAN was the name of a nearby island, which is modern-day Hatteras Island, and it was also the name of the Native American tribe living there, a tribe who had actually previously befriended the colonists.
But here is a crucial detail that almost always gets overlooked in all those spooky ghost stories. There was no distress signal. See, before White left for England, he explicitly instructed the colonists that if they were ever forced to leave under duress or in danger, they needed to carve a Maltese cross into a tree or post. White scoured the area, and there was absolutely no cross. 0. So the really important takeaway here is that this wasn't a panicked evacuation, and it wasn't an ambush. The missing cross strongly indicates this was a deliberate, planned relocation.
Before we dig into the real evidence of where they actually went, we need to quickly clear the board and toss out the wild myths that have clouded this case for literally decades. Supernatural portals? Yeah, we can cross those off. A Spanish attack? Nope, we can totally rule that out because Spanish archives show they were actually looking for the colony themselves in 1588 and found it already empty. A native massacre? That doesn't fit the evidence at all, mostly because there were no bodies and the houses were neatly taken apart, not burned down. And what about those infamous Dare stones found in the 1930s? Completely debunked as an elaborate hoax. So if it wasn't violence, and it wasn't the supernatural, what actually drove them away?
Chapter 2. An 800-year climate crisis. Turns out, the real reason the colonists vanished wasn't a who, it was a what. It was an unprecedented environmental disaster. To prove this, modern climatologists, led by David W. Stadel, turned to a totally different kind of historical record: nature's own archives. They used dendroclimatology. That's just a fancy word for the science of determining past climates by looking at tree rings. By taking core samples from ancient, long-lived bald cypress trees in the area. I mean, some of these trees can live for over 1,000 years. They were able to reconstruct an incredibly precise picture of the exact weather conditions from the time the colonists arrived. And you are not going to believe the staggering truth those tree rings revealed. Get this, the year 1587, the exact year those 115 colonists arrived on Roanoke Island hoping to farm and start fresh, was the absolute driest growing season the coastal region had experienced in 800 years. 8 centuries. This extreme drought lasted from 1587 all the way to 1589, so the colonists literally walked right into a once-in-a-millennium climate catastrophe. This just brilliantly illustrates the totally impossible situation they faced. The local native Algonquin populations were experiencing a brutal famine. Their own crops were devastated, leaving them with absolutely zero surplus food to trade with the newly arrived English. And on the flip side, the English colonists were starving. Their European crops failed entirely in the parched dirt, and the drought actually caused the local water tables to drop, leaving them with nothing but stagnant, salty drinking water. This climate crisis just paralyzed everybody. It completely cut the English off from their only lifeline. Survival on that isolated island became literally impossible. They simply had to leave.
Chapter 3: Secret Clues in the Map.
Okay, so if the drought forced them to abandon the island, where exactly did they go? Well, a massive break in the case comes from a 400-year-old document held thousands of miles away in the British Museum. It's Governor John White's own map, known as La Virginia Parse. Recently, researchers noticed these two faint paper patches on this ancient map, basically repairs made 4 centuries ago. When experts used advanced lighting techniques to peer beneath those patches, they made a stunning discovery. Hidden right beneath one of them was a tiny symbol of a fort, located about 50 miles inland, near the CROATOAN River and Salmon Creek. And remember, White's own historical accounts actually noted that before he left, the colonists discussed moving, quote, 50 miles further up into the main. This hidden symbol perfectly aligns with a secret pre-planned relocation site.
Chapter 4: Artifacts in the Earth. So we have the motive, right? The massive drought. We have a map pointing inland, and we have that carved post pointing to CROATOAN Island. Now let's look at what archaeologists have actually pulled out of the dirt at these exact locations. Inland, near that hidden map symbol at dig spots they call Site X and Site Y, they found Surrey, Hampshire borderware pottery, copper aglets, which were used for 16th century shoelaces, and tenterhooks. Meanwhile, out on Hatteras Island, the historical CROATOAN, digs have uncovered a 16th century swept hilt rapier, a Nuremberg token that is identical to ones found back at Roanoke, and smelted copper. In both of these locations, these incredibly tangible, everyday English artifacts were found buried right alongside Native American pottery.
But honestly, what archaeologists didn't find is just as important. Down in these specific dirt layers, there was a complete and total lack of 17th century trade items. No glass beads, no later colonial tobacco pipes, nothing. The complete absence of those later items proves that these specific artifacts weren't just traded decades later. They firmly belong to the late 16th century Roanoke era. It really grounds this whole mystery in physical reality. The colonists really were at these locations.
Chapter 5: The Survival Dispersal Strategy. So, looking at the undeniable climate data and these scattered 16th century artifacts, we can finally piece this giant puzzle together. The colonists didn't vanish by magic. Faced with a horrific 800-year drought, they executed a desperate, highly calculated dispersal strategy. Step 1. They abandoned the completely barren Roanoke Island, carefully dismantling their homes. Step 2. Recognizing that the drought-stricken environment couldn't possibly support 115 people all in one place, they split up into smaller, manageable factions. Step 3. They assimilated. One group went 50 miles inland to the Chowan River to live under the protection of the Choanoac tribe, exactly like that hidden map symbol suggested. And another group went south to Hatteras Island to live with the friendly CROATOAN tribe, exactly as that carved post told us.
You see, they didn't disappear. They adapted. They merged with the local indigenous populations to survive an absolute environmental nightmare. And honestly, this leaves us with such a haunting and fascinating thought. Think about it. If these English men, women, and children assimilated into native tribes and survived, then the bloodline of America's first English colonists may never have been lost at all. Are their descendants still walking among us today? It's a question that really invites us to look at American history not as a series of vanished ghosts, but as an incredible, deeply human shared story of survival. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.